last year in Miami, and I'm from there, and whole crowd was against me, and I was like, what on earth is going on? Like, where did these people come from?
Desert of California on March 7th, 2026, that most sports headlines got completely wrong. Alex Eala was down 4-5 in the third set of her match at Indian Wells, facing Diana Yastremska, a player ranked 52nd in the world. The match had already been going for well over 2 hours in cold, late-night conditions. The balls felt heavier in the cold air, the crowd was loud, passionate, and almost entirely Filipino. And then, Eala saved match point not once, not twice, but across 5 deuces in a single game, the 12th game of the deciding set. She held on. She won. And the crowd inside that stadium stopped being a tennis crowd and became something else entirely. What you are about to read is the real story, not the viral fabrications, not the clickbait shock headlines, but the verified, documented account of who Alex Eala actually is, what she has built, and why it matters far beyond tennis. If you want real analysis, not rumors, not hype, not AI-generated noise, then subscribe now. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join a community that cares about getting the story right. We cover the moments that matter, the details that get missed, and the truth behind the headlines. This channel exists because people like you demand better. So before we go any further, subscribe. To understand what happened at Indian Wells, you have to go back to November 19, 2025. That was exactly 1 calendar year after Rafael Nadal retired from professional tennis following the Davis Cup. And on that specific day, Nadal walked back onto a court, not for a charity event, not for a photo opportunity, but for a 45-minute high-intensity training session. His partner on the court was not a former rival. It was not a peer from the ATP Tour. It was Alex Eala, a 20-year-old from Quezon City in the Philippines. Nadal had already told Spanish media that his competitive fire for professional tennis was spent, that his tank, as he put it, was empty, and yet, the first time he chose to return to high-intensity play after retirement, he chose to do it with her. That is not shock. That is a deliberate statement of investment. And it was not just a casual hitting session. Nadal spent those 45 minutes working on very specific technical details, particularly Eala's left-handed forehand. That is the same left-handed forehand that 4 months later at Indian Wells was cutting through Yastremska's defensive setup with precision and consistency. The technical work Nadal did with her was not general fitness or motivational support. It was targeted, craft-level improvement on a weapon. When Eala herself talks about Nadal, she describes him not in inspirational terms, but in tactical ones. She has said directly that they are both left-handed, that she watched how he competed, and that she tries to channel that same approach on court. That is not hero worship. That is studying a blueprint and trying to apply it. Now let's talk about what actually happened in the match itself, because the highlights do not fully capture how that win was constructed. Eala's game against right-handed opponents like Yastremska works in a very specific way. Her left-handed forehand, when hit cross-court, produces a high-bouncing trajectory that lands directly on the opponent's backhand side. It forces defensive positioning, it draws errors, it disrupts rhythm. Against a player like Yastremska, who is a capable defender, this creates sustained pressure across long rallies, exactly the kind of grind that a 163-minute match requires. But the match was not straightforward. Eala fell to 4-5 in the third set and was staring at elimination. At that moment, she made a tactical adjustment. She deepened her returns, changed the pace of her ground strokes, and began to disrupt Yastremska's service rhythm. She broke back to reach 5-5. Then she held to reach 6-5. Then came the 12th game, a game that went to 5 deuces. 5 deuces in a single game in the deciding set, with the match on the line. Eala won it. She won the match 6-7, 6-4, 7-6 in those conditions, in that cold, in front of that crowd, against a player ranked in the world's top 55. The match earned her 65 ranking points and $61,865 in prize money. But the story of what came next went far beyond tennis.
You have probably seen the phrase Filipino Army used to describe Eala's fanbase in coverage of her 2026 Indian Wells run. It gets used casually, as if it just means a lot of enthusiastic supporters, but this framing collapses something very specific into something very vague, and the specifics are where the real story is. California is home to the largest Filipino population of any state in the United States, an estimated 2 million people. That is not a small diaspora community tucked into one neighborhood. It is a substantial, connected, culturally cohesive population spread across the state, and Indian Wells sits right in the heart of the region they call home. During Eala's practice sessions at the tournament, fans with phones and selfie sticks lined the courts to watch her drill. People sat on adjacent practice courts just to catch a glimpse of her working. During the match itself, the crowd was described by observers as predominantly Filipino. Tournament officials at the 2026 BNP Paribas Open confirmed on record that Eala is bringing a new demographic into the sport, increasing center court attendance, expanding the WTA's reach into the Southeast Asian diaspora in a way that has never happened at this tournament before. That is not cultural enthusiasm. That is measurable market disruption. The WTA is watching a demographic shift happen in real time, and Alexandra Eala is the direct cause of it. But not everything about this phenomenon is straightforward. At the 2026 Australian Open, during Eala's match against Alicia Parks, the pro-Eala crowd drew criticism for cheering loudly at Parks' unforced errors. Observers described it as creating a hostile atmosphere on court. This is the tension that sits at the very center of the Eala story, the part that most headline writers either ignore or gloss over. The same fan base that tournament officials credit for filling seats and driving digital engagement was flagged by security at the Australian Open for behavior that sits well outside the traditional norms of tennis crowd etiquette. This is a genuine logistical and cultural challenge for the WTA. A fan base this large, this emotionally invested, and this culturally distinct from the sport's historical audience does not automatically adapt to the quiet, restrained norms that have governed tennis crowds for over a century. How do you channel that kind of passionate energy without alienating the sport's existing audience?
How do you grow the sport's reach into new demographics while protecting the competitive environment that elite athletes need? No tournament director has publicly answered those questions yet, but they are being asked internally, and the answers will matter a great deal as Eala continues to rise. Now we need to talk about something that has been polluting the conversation around Eala, because the crowd etiquette story is actually the smallest controversy in her media ecosystem right now. There has been a wave of fabricated stories circulating online about her, and they are damaging in a very specific way, not just because they are false, but because they're so over the top that they actually undersell how remarkable her real story already is. The most widely shared fabrication claimed that Abu Dhabi billionaire Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan had offered Eala a contract worth $1.6 billion with a $1 billion down payment and $600 million per year for 10 years. Fact-checkers confirmed that no such offer ever existed. There were no documents, no official statements, no reports from any credible sports or financial outlet to support any part of the story. Eala herself publicly expressed concern about the spread of what she called shocking misinformation online. Other fabricated stories claimed that Novak Djokovic had boycotted a broadcaster in defense of Eala. Others claimed Oprah Winfrey had publicly criticized her. Again, none of these stories were supported by a single verified report from any major news organization. Here is what is actually true about Eala's financial situation based on verified public records. As of March 2026, she has earned approximately $1,665,667 in career prize money. In 2025 alone, she earned close to $97,000, which translates to roughly 53 million Philippine pesos. Her single largest career payday came at the 2025 Miami Open, where she earned $332,000 during a historic semi-final run as a wild card. She holds a Milo endorsement deal that analysts have described as a significant financial cushion, one that funds a full traveling support team, including specialized physiotherapists. and there are serious, ongoing discussions about the possibility of a future WTA event being held in Manila. These are real developments, they are significant, and yet the fabricated billion-dollar contract stories have gotten far more online engagement than any of them. Let's be clear about where Eala actually stands in the competitive landscape heading into the rest of 2026. She entered Indian Wells ranked number 31 in the world, not as a wild card, not as a qualifier receiving a special exemption. She was a seeded professional player with a first-round bye earned on merit through her results over the previous 12 months. In the first 2 months of 2026 alone, she had already reached 3 quarterfinals at different tournaments. Experts covering the WTA have already named her a realistic threat to break into the top 10 before the year is over. At number 31, that target is within range if her form holds. Her third-round opponent at Indian Wells 2026 was world number 4 Coco Gauff, her former doubles partner and someone she had already faced just weeks earlier in the quarterfinals of the Dubai Championships. The Gauff-Eala matchup is now being discussed in WTA circles as a marquee rivalry in the making, American elite tennis against the surging Southeast Asian market, the face of the sport's established American fan base against a player whose career has become a national movement in the Philippines. That framing is not accidental. The WTA is a commercial entity, and a rivalry that carries genuine broadcast value across 2 of the largest sports markets in the world is something every major tournament will want on center court. Following Indian Wells, Eala's next major event is the Miami Open, running from March 17th through March 29th, 2026. Miami carries particular personal significance for her. It was at the 2025 Miami Open that she produced what remains her most historic professional result, reaching the semifinal as a wild card, beating both Iga Swiatek and Madison Keys along the way. Those are not minor names. Swiatek is one of the best players in the world. Keys is a proven Grand Slam finalist. Eala beat both of them on the same run. Interestingly, she has also recalled that the Miami crowd was not always supportive of her during that 2025 run, that at moments the crowd was actively against her, which she described as disorienting at the time. That context makes the difference in crowd atmosphere that she now experiences all the more striking. Defending those 2025 Miami points on top of her 2026 first quarter results defines the baseline she is now expected to maintain. That is a different kind of pressure than what a wild card or rising prospect faces. It is the pressure of expectation, of being the player others now study and prepare for specifically. That shift in dynamic from hunter to hunted is one of the most difficult transitions in professional tennis. How Eala handles it over the next several months will tell us a great deal about her long-term ceiling. So what is the actual story of Alexandra Eala in 2026? It is the story of a 20-year-old from Quezon City, Philippines, who built a left-handed forehand under a 22-time Grand Slam champion who came out of retirement specifically to work with her. It is the story of a player who fought back from 4-5 in the third set, survived 5 deuces in the deciding game, and ground out a 163-minute win in cold conditions against the top 55 player, a win that nobody in the stadium will forget. It is the story of a demographic shift in professional tennis, driven by the largest Filipino community in the United States showing up in force for one of their own. It is the story of a real financial career, carefully built on prize money and legitimate endorsements, being buried under an avalanche of fabricated billion-dollar contracts and fake celebrity feuds. And it is the story of a question that professional tennis has not yet answered. When a fan base this large, this emotionally connected, and this culturally distinct from the sport's traditional audience follows a player this talented into the top levels of the game, at what point does the crowd stop being an asset and start becoming a complication? Nobody in charge has publicly worked out the answer to that yet, but they are going to have to, because Alexandra Eala is not slowing down, the Filipino Army is not going anywhere, and the gap between the fabricated version of this story and the real one is already staggering and growing wider every single week.